NASA just confirmed that J1407b isn't what almost everyone thinks it is. For years, people called it the Lord of the Rings, because it was believed to have the biggest ring system ever found. Those rings were said to be 40,000 times wider than Saturn's. But there's one huge problem. New evidence suggests this famous planet may not even be a planet at all. Trust me, I was just as surprised as you are. Before we get into it, let me know where you're watching from, because this story completely changes everything we thought we knew about J1407b. For those of you who haven't heard of J1407b before, there's a good chance you've still seen pictures of it online. It's the planet with the giant rings that seem almost too incredible to be real. People called it the Lord of the Rings, Super Saturn, even Saturn on steroids. The numbers sounded unbelievable. Those rings were thought to stretch nearly 120 million kilometers across, making them around 40,000 times larger than Saturn's. Compared to every other planet we know, nothing even came close. That's exactly why J1407b became so famous. It wasn't just another exoplanet buried inside a science paper. It became one of the most talked about worlds on the internet. Space videos, articles, documentaries, even space simulators featured it as one of the greatest discoveries ever made. If you loaded up Space Engine, a program that recreates the known universe at full scale, you could actually fly right up to J1407b and see those enormous rings surrounding it. Honestly, it looked like something straight out of science fiction. The strange part is that astronomers never actually photographed those rings directly. Everything started back in 2007, when scientists studying a young star called V1400 Centauri noticed something very unusual. The star didn't simply get a little dimmer for a few hours like a normal planet passing in front of it. Instead, its brightness changed over and over again for almost 2 months. The whole event lasted around 57 days. That caught everyone's attention. A normal planet couldn't block starlight for that long. Something much larger had to be passing in front of the star. After studying this strange pattern, researchers came up with an exciting explanation. They believed a giant object surrounded by an enormous system of rings had crossed in front of V1400 Centauri. Those rings would have been so huge that they completely changed the star's brightness as each one passed by. Suddenly, everything made sense. The unusual light pattern matched what scientists expected from a massive ring system. The object itself was estimated to be somewhere between a giant planet and a brown dwarf, but the rings became the real headline. They were unlike anything anyone had ever imagined. News spread quickly because the idea was simply impossible to ignore, and that's where the legend of J1407b really began. For years, almost everyone accepted that explanation. Videos repeated it, websites repeated it, artists created stunning images showing a world surrounded by rings so large they would fill the sky. It became one of those discoveries people pointed to whenever someone asked, "What's the craziest planet we've ever found?" There was just one problem. Nobody had actually seen J1407b again. For a while, everything seemed settled. Astronomers had their explanation, the public loved the discovery, and J1407b became one of the most famous planets ever talked about. But science doesn't stop after one observation. It keeps asking the same question over and over again. Can we see it happen again? Based on the original calculations, researchers knew roughly when J1407b should pass in front of V1400 Centauri another time. If it really was orbiting that star, another eclipse wasn't just possible, it was expected. So they watched, and they waited. Nothing happened. No giant rings blocked the star. No strange pattern appeared in the light. The famous object that had made headlines around the world was nowhere to be seen. That was a huge problem. One missing observation might not sound like much, but in astronomy, it's a really big deal. Discoveries become stronger every time they're repeated. When something only happens once, scientists have to start asking whether their first explanation was actually correct. Before we go any further, if you're enjoying this story and want more videos that separate space facts from space myths, make sure you subscribe. There are so many incredible discoveries out there, but the real stories are often even more surprising than the headlines. Now here's where things started getting really strange. Researchers began looking at another possibility. What if J1407b wasn't orbiting the star at all? What if it simply passed in front of it one time by pure chance? At first, that sounded almost impossible. Space is unbelievably huge. The odds of one object lining up perfectly with another from Earth's point of view seem incredibly small. That's exactly why astronomers originally believed the object had to belong to the star system. But sometimes unlikely things really do happen. As scientists looked deeper into the data, another problem appeared. Those giant rings that made J1407b so famous might not even be able to survive around the star in the first place. Gravity doesn't only come from the planet, the star pulls on the rings too. Imagine spinning a perfectly flat record while someone keeps pushing one side of it every time it goes around. Little by little, the record starts bending, twisting, and falling apart. The same thing would happen to a ring system that large. Over time, the star's gravity would pull on different parts of the rings until they became unstable. In computer simulations, that's exactly what happened. Instead of staying as one beautiful flat disk, the rings slowly stretched out of shape. The longer the simulation ran, the worse it became. Suddenly, the world's most famous ring system didn't look so certain anymore. In fact, astronomers were beginning to wonder if they had been looking at something completely different all along. As researchers kept digging into the evidence, a completely different picture started to appear. Instead of finding a giant planet with impossible rings, they found clues pointing toward something much stranger. The object we call J1407b may not be a planet at all. Right now, the leading idea is that it's actually a brown dwarf. If you've never heard that term before, think of it as something that sits between a planet and a star. It's much bigger than Jupiter, but it never becomes massive enough to shine like a real star. That changes everything. If J1407b isn't orbiting V100 Centauri, then the missing eclipse suddenly makes a lot more sense. It may have simply drifted in front of the star one time by chance before continuing on its own path through space. At first, many scientists thought that idea sounded unlikely. The odds of two objects lining up so perfectly seem incredibly small. But after years passed without another eclipse, that explanation started looking much more believable than the original one. Then came another important discovery. In 2017, astronomers used the Atacama Large Millimeter Array, better known as ALMA, to take a closer look at the area around V1400 Centauri. They found an object near the star that could possibly be J1407b. Notice the word could. Even today, that identification hasn't been confirmed with complete certainty. But what ALMA revealed next was even more interesting. The famous rings that made J1407b a legend might not be rings at all. Instead, researchers believe they could be a huge cloud of dust and gas surrounding the brown dwarf. This is called a protoplanetary disk. It's the same kind of material that eventually sticks together to form planets and moons. So instead of looking at the biggest ring system ever discovered, we might actually be looking at a place where entirely new worlds are being born. That's an incredible twist. But the mystery doesn't end there. Some scientists think there may not even be a protoplanetary disk. Another possibility is that ALMA simply detected a distant galaxy sitting far behind the object. From Earth's point of view, the two could appear close together, creating the illusion that something much larger was surrounding J1407b. So now there are multiple explanations. Was it a giant ring system? A rogue brown dwarf carrying a planet-forming disk? Or was part of the original observation simply a trick of perspective? Nobody can say for sure just yet. What we do know is that the famous story almost everyone believed for years is no longer the leading explanation. The object is still real, but what it actually is has become one of the most fascinating mysteries in modern astronomy. And the answer may finally be closer than ever. You'd probably think that after all this evidence came out, everyone would stop calling J1407b a giant ringed planet. But that's not what happened. In fact, the opposite happened. Even today, you'll still find videos, articles, and social media posts showing the same giant rings that made J1407b famous. Some of them were uploaded years after scientists had already started questioning the original idea. Many never mentioned the newer research at all. That's how scientific myths spread. One website copies another. A video uses an older article as its source. Someone else repeats that video, and before long, millions of people are hearing the same story without realizing it's based on information that's no longer considered the best explanation. J1407b is probably one of the biggest examples of that. Space Engine even included the object in its universe simulator because the original discovery was accepted at the time. If you've ever explored space using the program, you've probably flown right up to this incredible world and admired those enormous rings. Then something unexpected happened. The Space Engine team quietly removed J1407b from the simulator. That surprised a lot of people. After all, why would they remove one of the most famous planets ever added to the program? The answer was simple. They wanted the simulator to match the latest scientific evidence. The developers later explained that there was growing evidence the original discovery was likely a false positive. Something that dramatic should have been seen again after so many years, yet no second transit had ever been detected. Because of that, they no longer felt confident presenting J1407b as a real ringed planet. They even released a separate file so people who still wanted the original version could add it back themselves. But here's the part that catches many people off guard. NASA's own Exoplanet website continued listing J1407b as a planet for quite some time. Seeing it on an official page made many people assume the original discovery was still completely accepted. That only added more confusion, especially when newer studies were pointing in a different direction. None of this means scientists were trying to fool anyone. It simply shows how difficult it can be for public information to keep up with ongoing research. Science moves forward one observation at a time, while websites, videos, and articles often stay exactly as they were when they were first published. That's why one exciting discovery can live on for years, even after better evidence begins telling a different story. And honestly, it's easy to understand why people wanted to believe it. A planet with rings, 40,000 times larger than Saturn, sounds almost too amazing to give up. But science has never been about protecting exciting ideas. It's about following the evidence, even when that evidence leads somewhere completely different. So, does that mean the mystery is finally solved? Not quite. Even though the giant ringed planet idea has mostly fallen apart, astronomers are still trying to figure out exactly what J1407b really is. That's because there are still a few pieces of the puzzle that don't fit together perfectly. The most exciting part is that scientists haven't stopped looking. After ALMA spotted an object near V1400 Centauri, researchers continued studying the system with even better observations. Every new set of data brings them one step closer to answering the question that's been hanging over this discovery for years. Did they actually find J1407b? Or did they find something completely different? At the time those observations were announced, the results still hadn't been fully published. That meant astronomers had to be careful. Instead of making bold claims, they waited for the evidence to be checked, reviewed, and confirmed. That's how science is supposed to work. It's very different from the internet, where one exciting headline can spread around the world in a few hours. Scientists don't win by being first, they win by being right. And that's an important difference. If the object ALMA detected really is J1407b, then it could support the idea that we're looking at a rogue brown dwarf surrounded by a huge disk of dust and gas. That would still be an amazing discovery. It just wouldn't be the discovery people originally believed it was. On the other hand, if future observations show that the object isn't J1407b at all, then astronomers may have to rethink the entire story once again. That's happened before. Some of the biggest discoveries in space have changed several times as better telescopes collected better data. What looks certain today can look completely different a few years later. J1407b is becoming another example of that process. What's interesting is that this mystery has actually become more exciting over time. Years ago, people thought they already had the answer. Today, scientists know they don't. Sometimes asking the right question is more valuable than believing the wrong answer. That's exactly where we are now. Some researchers believe the object is a brown dwarf with a planet-forming disk. Others think part of the original signal may have come from a distant background galaxy lining up by chance. Until more observations are finished, neither idea can be ruled out completely. That uncertainty isn't a weakness. It's the reason astronomy keeps moving forward. Every new telescope, every new observation, and every new paper helps remove another small piece of the mystery. Little by little, the picture becomes clearer. Maybe the next published results will finally confirm what crossed in front of V1400 Centauri all those years ago. Or maybe they'll surprise everyone again. After everything that's happened with J1407b, one thing has become very clear. The universe is under no obligation to match the stories we want to believe. It only follows the evidence. And sometimes that evidence leads to something even more incredible than the original discovery. By now, you might be wondering whether this whole story is disappointing. After all, the idea of a planet with rings 40,000 times larger than Saturn sounded incredible. Losing that picture almost feels like losing a place that really existed. Honestly, a lot of people felt that way. Whenever space fans were asked to name their favorite planet outside our solar system, J1407b almost always came up near the top of the list. That's easy to understand. If someone tells you there's a world with rings so massive they would fill the sky from horizon to horizon, it's almost impossible not to imagine standing there and looking up. That's exactly why this story spread so quickly. But here's something even more amazing. Science isn't about protecting exciting ideas. It's about testing them until only the strongest explanations survive. Sometimes the evidence supports the original discovery, sometimes it doesn't. Either way, we learned something new. J1407b is a perfect example. Back in 2007, astronomers observed something they had never seen before. They studied the light coming from a distant star, built the best explanation they could with the information they had, and shared it with the scientific community. At the time, the giant ring system fit the evidence surprisingly well. Years later, new observations painted a different picture. Instead of ignoring those results, researchers looked at them honestly. They asked difficult questions. They tested new ideas. They searched for better explanations, even though those explanations were less exciting than the original headline. That's exactly what good science looks like. It doesn't matter how popular an idea becomes. It doesn't matter how many videos are made about it or how many websites repeat it. If new evidence points somewhere else, scientists have to follow that evidence. That takes humility. It's never easy to admit that an earlier conclusion may have been incomplete. But that's one of the biggest strengths of science. Every discovery is open to being tested again. In fact, that's why we trust science in the first place. Imagine if astronomers refused to change their minds simply because people liked the original story. We'd still be believing ideas that better observations have already challenged. Instead, researchers keep asking questions, building better instruments, and collecting more data. Every generation gets a clearer picture of the universe than the one before it. That's something worth celebrating. J1407b may never become the legendary ringed planet people once imagined, but it has already become something just as important. It's a reminder that the universe doesn't owe us simple answers. Sometimes the truth is more complicated than we hoped. Sometimes it's completely different from what we expected. And sometimes that's what makes it so fascinating. Because every time one mystery is solved, another one appears. That's exactly where the story of J1407b stands today. The giant rings may be fading into history, but the real mystery is still very much alive. Researchers are still searching, new observations are still coming, and somewhere beyond our solar system, the object that started all of this is still out there, waiting for us to finally understand what it really is. So where does that leave us now? The answer is surprisingly simple. J1407b may not be the giant ringed planet everyone imagined, but that doesn't mean a world like it can never exist. It only means we haven't found one yet. And that's an exciting thought. The universe is unbelievably large. Our galaxy alone contains hundreds of billions of stars, and beyond that are billions of other galaxies stretching farther than we can truly imagine. We've only confirmed a tiny fraction of the planets that are actually out there. That means we've barely started looking. Every year, new telescopes discover worlds that seem impossible at first. We found planets hotter than lava, planets where it rains glass, giant worlds orbiting 2 stars, and frozen planets drifting through space without a sun of their own. 20 years ago, many of those discoveries would have sounded like science fiction. Today, they're real. That's why astronomers haven't given up on finding a true super Saturn. Somewhere in the universe, there could be a planet with rings far larger than anything in our solar system. Maybe not 40,000 times wider than Saturn's, but still large enough to completely change what we know about planetary systems. The important thing is that when we finally find it, we'll know it's real because the evidence will support it. Not because it makes a great headline. That's the difference this story teaches us. J1407b became famous because people loved the idea. The next great discovery will become famous because scientists can prove it over and over again. And we're getting closer to that future every year. New observatories are already changing the way we study distant worlds. More powerful telescopes can detect smaller planets, study their atmospheres, and collect details that weren't possible just a few years ago. Every improvement gives astronomers another chance to uncover something completely unexpected. The next breakthrough could happen tomorrow. It could happen next month. Or it could already be sitting inside data that researchers are analyzing right now. That's what makes astronomy so addictive. Every night, the universe is giving us new information. Most of it goes unnoticed. But every once in a while, one discovery changes everything we thought we knew. For years, J1407b was that discovery. Now it's becoming something different. Instead of being remembered as the planet with the biggest rings ever found, it may be remembered as the object that reminded the scientific world never to stop asking questions. And honestly, that's an even bigger legacy. Because one day, somewhere far beyond our solar system, astronomers probably will find the real Lord of the Rings. When that day comes, nobody will have to wonder whether it's another false alarm. The evidence will speak for itself. And after everything we've learned from J1407b, we'll know exactly why that matters. When people look back at the story of J1407b years from now, they probably won't remember it as the planet with the biggest rings ever discovered. They'll remember it as the discovery that reminded everyone how science really works. One strange event in 2007 sparked an idea that captured the imagination of millions. Artists brought it to life. Videos made it famous. Space fans dreamed about standing beneath rings so large they would cover the entire sky. For a long time, it felt like we had found one of the most incredible worlds in the universe. Then the evidence changed. Instead of pretending nothing had happened, astronomers went back to the data. They asked new questions. They tested old ideas. Little by little, the picture became clearer. The object that looked like a giant ringed planet now appears to be something very different. That doesn't erase the original discovery. It makes it even more important. Every observation, even the ones that turn out to be incomplete, teaches us something. Without that first eclipse, scientists might never have searched for better answers. Without years of follow-up observations, we might still believe a story that no longer fits the evidence. That's how progress happens. Science isn't a straight line from question to answer. It's a path filled with wrong turns, better ideas, new technology, and unexpected discoveries. Every mistake points researchers towards something they didn't know before. J1407b is proof of that. It also reminds us to be careful about what we believe online. Just because a headline sounds exciting doesn't mean it's the full story. A video with millions of views isn't automatically correct. Even trusted sources can take time to catch up when new research changes the picture. That's why asking questions matters. It's also why checking the latest evidence matters even more. The universe is constantly surprising us. Sometimes those surprises confirm our biggest dreams. Other times, they replace them with something completely different. Either way, we're learning more than we knew yesterday. And that's the real adventure. Somewhere out there, beyond our solar system, there may still be a planet with rings so enormous that Saturn would look tiny beside it. Maybe astronomers will discover it next year. Maybe it'll take another decade. Or maybe it'll appear when a future telescope spots something nobody was expecting. When that day comes, the story of J1407b will still have mattered. Because it taught scientists, and all of us, one simple lesson. Never stop following the evidence. The famous giant rings may never have existed, but the curiosity they inspired is absolutely real. That curiosity is what built better telescopes, inspired new observations, and pushed researchers to keep searching long after the headlines faded away. So perhaps J1407b wasn't the legendary world everyone hoped for. Maybe it gave us